The SEAL commander's smirk said it all, another paper pusher pretending to be an operator. But when the enemy ambush turned his elite team into sitting ducks, and their million-dollar training couldn't save them, Lucy King did something that made every man on that ridge question everything they thought they knew about warfare. She picked up a rifle they didn't know she had, walked into a kill zone alone, and put 5 rounds through 5 targets in 3 seconds flat. The commander's exact words whispered through gritted teeth as he watched her work. "No woman shoots like that." He was right. No woman did. Because Lucy King wasn't just any woman, and what happened next would force America's deadliest warriors to confront a truth they'd never wanted to face. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimated. The C-130 shuddered through turbulence over the Hindu Kush, its cargo bay packed with men who'd learned to sleep through anything, except Lucy King. She sat perfectly still in the canvas seat, eyes open, watching the play of shadows as the aircraft bucked and rolled. 28 years old, compact build, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun that made her face look severe. She wore the same desert fatigues as everyone else, the same body armor, the same expression of professional boredom, but her eyes, gray like winter storms, tracked every movement in the cargo bay with an intensity that suggested she was cataloging threats that didn't exist yet. Across from her, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reeves caught her gaze and looked away first. That had been happening a lot since she'd joined their transport. The SEALs didn't know what to make of the woman from Joint Special Operations Command who'd attached herself to their mission like a barnacle on a ship's hull. Her file said, Intelligence Analyst. Her bearing said something entirely different. 30 minutes to drop, the loadmaster called over the engine noise. The SEALs stirred, checking weapons with the kind of casual efficiency that came from doing the same ritual 1,000 times. Lucy remained motionless except for her hands, which moved through her gear with methodical precision. Sidearm, magazines, medical kit, communications equipment, everything exactly where it needed to be, everything within reach without thinking. Lieutenant Commander Jack Hawthorne made his way down the cargo bay, grabbing overhead straps for balance as the aircraft pitched. He was everything Central Casting would order for a SEAL officer. Tall, broad-shouldered, square-jawed, with the kind of confidence that came from never truly failing at anything that mattered. He stopped in front of Lucy, looking down at her with an expression that wasn't quite hostile but wasn't welcoming either. "King," he said, voice pitched to carry over the engines, "let's be clear about expectations. This is a direct action raid. You stay with the command element, you observe, you take notes, you do not engage unless we're being overrun, and you have literally no other choice. Clear?" Lucy looked up at him with those storm-gray eyes. "Crystal, sir." "I mean it. I've got 12 shooters who've trained together for months. We don't need heroics from the intelligence section." "Understood." Hawthorne waited, as if expecting her to say more, to protest or make excuses. When she just returned his stare with perfect calm, he grunted and moved on. Behind her she heard Petty Officer Second Class Danny Torres mutter to his swim buddy, "Bet you $20 she freezes up the second round, start flying." "No bet," came the response. "They always do." Lucy filed their voices away, memorizing the tones, the speech patterns, the underlying assumptions. Intel work had taught her that people revealed more in casual conversation than in formal briefings. And right now, these men were revealing exactly what she'd expected. They saw her as a liability wrapped in bureaucratic red tape. The aircraft's loadmaster began the final approach checklist. Lucy closed her eyes and began her own ritual, one that nobody else in the cargo bay would understand. She didn't pray. She didn't visualize success. She simply acknowledged what she was about to walk into and accepted it with the clinical detachment of someone who'd learned that emotion was baggage you couldn't afford to carry. The ramp dropped, and Afghanistan's dawn air rushed in, dry, cold, tasting of dust and diesel fuel. The SEALs moved out with practiced efficiency, boots hitting packed earth in a tactical formation that had been drilled until it became instinct. Lucy followed, keeping her assigned position in the command element, close enough to observe but far enough back that she wouldn't interfere with the real operators. Except Lucy King had never been just an observer, and before this day ended, everyone would know it. The compound sat in a valley like a wound in the earth, surrounded by terraced hillsides that had been farmed for generations. Pre-dawn light painted everything in shades of gray and purple, making the mud brick walls look like something from a sepia photograph. Intelligence said the target, a high-value Taliban commander, was inside with his security detail. Intelligence said 6 to 8 fighters, light weapons, minimal sophistication. Intelligence, Lucy knew from bitter experience, was often optimistic. The SEALs moved through the approach with textbook precision. Lucy stayed with Hawthorne and the radio operator, watching as the assault element closed on the compound. She could see Chief Reeves moving point, reading the ground for IEDs, checking corners with his rifle, tracking smooth and controlled. These men were professionals, the best America had to offer. And something was wrong. Lucy felt it before she could articulate it, that crawling sensation between her shoulder blades that combat veterans learned to trust. The compound was too quiet. No dogs barking, no roosters, no sound of life stirring with the dawn. Just silence pressing down like weight. "Sir," she said quietly to Hawthorne, "something's off." He glanced at her, irritated. "They're asleep. We're here before Reveille, that's the point. No dogs. Rural Afghanistan, no dogs. Maybe they ate them." "King, I need you to—" The first explosion shattered the dawn silence like glass, not inside the compound, behind it. A massive IED that had been buried in the approach route, timed to detonate after the assault element passed, but while the support element was still in the kill zone. Lucy felt the shockwave punch through her chest as a column of flame and smoke erupted from the hillside. Men were down, screaming. The radio came alive with frantic calls for corpsmen, for situational reports, for someone to explain what the hell just happened. And then the shooting started. Not from the compound, from the terraced hillsides, from positions that had been prepared, fortified, turned into fighting positions by someone who understood exactly how American Special Operations Forces conducted raids. Muzzle flashes sparkled like malevolent stars as automatic weapons fire raked the valley floor. The ambush was perfect. The SEALs had walked into a trap designed specifically for them, and now they were pinned in a kill zone with wounded men and no cover. Hawthorne was shouting into his radio, trying to coordinate a response, trying to get his scattered team to rally. Lucy watched with cold calculation as rounds kicked up dust around their position. She counted muzzle flashes, estimated ranges, identified the enemy's probable command element based on which positions fired in coordinated bursts. Her hand moved unconsciously to her sidearm, then stopped. Not yet. Not unless absolutely necessary. A SEAL went down 10 meters to her left, clutching his leg where a bullet had found the gap in his armor. Another dragged him toward a low wall, rounds snapping past their heads with sounds like angry hornets. The firebase was supposed to provide overwatch. Where the hell was the firebase? "Outpost Delta is under attack," the radio operator reported, his voice tight with stress. "Heavy contact." They can't support. Of course they couldn't. This wasn't an opportunistic ambush. This was a coordinated operation, hitting multiple targets simultaneously, designed to isolate and destroy an American Special Operations element. And it was working. Lucy keyed her own radio, speaking on the command frequency with calm that bordered on eerie. "Heathen 6, this is Cypher 7. Request immediate air support, coordinates to follow. Multiple enemy fighting positions, dug in. Estimate 30 to 40 combatants, prepared defenses." "Cypher 7, Heathen 6. Be advised air assets are 20 minutes out. Can you hold?" Lucy looked at the chaos unfolding around her, at the SEALs fighting desperately against an enemy that held every advantage. 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours. "Negative, Heathen 6, we need it now." "Working at Cypher 7, stand by." Standing by wasn't an option. Another SEAL went down, this time not getting back up. The corpsman who tried to reach him took fire that forced him back into cover. Lucy could see the enemy commander now, or at least where she thought he was, based on which position was controlling the other's fire. A terraced position halfway up the hillside, perfect angles into the valley, hardened against counter-battery fire. Chief Reeves made it back to the command element, breathing hard, a cut above his eye leaking blood down his face. "Sir, we're getting torn apart. We need to move, need to find cover, something." "There is no cover," Hawthorne snapped. "It's all kill zone. They planned this perfectly." "Then we die here?" Torres demanded, his earlier swagger replaced by the sharp edge of fear. Lucy stood up. Just stood up, calm as someone rising from a church pew. Every SEAL stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Standing in a firefight was how you got shot. Everyone knew that. Everyone except Lucy King, who was already moving toward a low berm that provided marginal cover and a sightline to the enemy positions. "King, get down!" Hawthorne roared. She ignored him. Her hand went to the small of her back beneath her vest and produced a weapon that definitely wasn't standard intelligence analyst issue. The rifle was compact, black, custom-modified in ways that spoke of very specific requirements. A suppressor that suggested someone wanted to work quietly. Optics that cost more than most cars. She deployed the bipod with one smooth motion and went prone behind the berm, cheek to stock, breathing already controlled. Through her scope, the enemy positions resolved with crystalline clarity. She could see muzzle flashes, see movement behind rock fortifications, see the heat shimmer rising from barrels that had been firing too long. "What the hell?" Reeves started. Lucy's first shot was nearly silent, just a suppressed crack barely audible over the ongoing firefight. On the hillside, a figure operating a PKM machine gun suddenly pitched backward, his weapon falling silent. The other SEALs didn't even realize what had happened until Lucy was already transitioning to her second target. The rifle cracked again, another fighter down. This one had been directing fire, coordinating the ambush from a protected position. He'd thought he was invisible, safe behind his stone breastwork. He'd been wrong. Lucy worked through targets with mechanical efficiency. Each shot was deliberate, calculated, final. She wasn't trying to suppress the enemy or make them keep their heads down. She was systematically removing them from the battlefield, one precise shot at a time. The kind of shooting that looked easy but required years of training, perfect understanding of ballistics, and the kind of cold nerve that most people never developed. The SEALs watched in stunned silence as their intelligence analyst transformed into something else entirely. Her shots were finding targets at ranges that should have been impossible with such a compact weapon. She was compensating for wind, elevation, even the rising heat of the day with adjustments so subtle they looked like instinct. A rocket-propelled grenade team was preparing to fire into the pinned-down Americans. Lucy put a round through the gunner's chest at 400 meters, transitioning immediately to the loader before he could pick up the weapon. Both men dropped within 2 seconds of each other. The RPG clattered down the hillside unused. "Jesus Christ," Torres whispered. "Who is this woman?" Hawthorne was watching through his scope, tracking Lucy's shots, seeing the enemy position collapse under fire from someone who wasn't supposed to be carrying a weapon, much less using it with this level of expertise. "King, what the hell are you?" She didn't answer. Her world had narrowed to the scope picture, to the gentle pressure of the trigger, to the rhythm of controlled breathing and precise trigger press. The enemy commander, or who she'd identified as the commander, was trying to reposition. She could see him moving between terraces, thinking he was concealed by the terrain. He was wrong about that, too. The shot was difficult. Moving target partially obscured at a distance where most shooters would have trouble hitting stationary paper. Lucy led him by exactly the right amount, squeezed when everything was perfect, and watched through her optic as the figure collapsed mid-stride. The effect on the remaining fighters was immediate. Without central coordination, their disciplined fire became sporadic, uncoordinated. Individual positions started making decisions based on survival rather than tactics. And survival meant withdrawing, getting away from the invisible death that was finding them no matter where they hid. Lucy fired 3 more times in quick succession, each shot finding a target who thought they were safely retreating. The lesson was stark. There was no safe retreat. Not from her. "They're breaking," Reeves said, disbelief in his voice. "She's breaking them by herself." The firefight didn't end with dramatic finality. It just stopped. The enemy positions fell silent one by one, either because their occupants were dead or because they'd fled into the hills. The valley filled with an almost oppressive quiet, broken only by the moans of wounded men and the crackle of flames from destroyed equipment. Lucy saved her weapon and stood, showing no visible emotion. No satisfaction, no relief, no aftermath adrenaline shakes. She just stood there, weapon held ready, scanning for threats that no longer existed. Hawthorne approached slowly, like someone approaching a dangerous animal they weren't sure was tame. King. His voice was different now. No dismissal, no condescension. Something closer to awe mixed with apprehension. "What the fuck was that?" She looked at him with those gray eyes. "That was me keeping your team alive, sir." "Intelligence analysts don't shoot like that. Nobody shoots like that. I'm not really an intelligence analyst." "No shit. So what are you really?" Lucy ejected her magazine, checked the chamber, then reloaded with movements that spoke of thousands of repetitions. "The person they send when intelligence isn't enough. The person they send when they need someone who can read a situation and fix it. The person," she paused, meeting his gaze directly, "they send when they need targets eliminated, and nobody can know who did the eliminating." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Reeves broke it, his voice carrying across the valley. "We've got wounded who need immediate evacuation, and we need to police this area before someone higher up the food chain decides to hit us with mortars." Hawthorne was still staring at Lucy. "How many did you get?" 17 confirmed. Maybe 3 more that I'm not certain about." 17. He said it like he was testing the word. "In how many minutes? Does it matter?" Yeah. Yeah, it matters. Because I've been doing this job for 12 years, and I've never seen anyone shoot like you just did. The question I'm asking myself is whether you're an asset or a threat." Lucy slung her rifle across her chest. "Right now, Commander, I'm the reason your men are going home alive. That's all that should matter." She walked away, heading toward where the corpsman was working on wounded SEALs, leaving Hawthorne standing alone with thoughts that he'd probably never fully process. Behind him, Torres and his swim buddy were having a quiet conversation. "Did you see that shit?" "I saw it. I don't believe it, but I saw it." "Who the hell is she?" "Someone way above our pay grade, brother. Way above." The sun was higher now, burning away the morning chill, painting the valley in harsh light that revealed every detail of the firefight. Spent brass littered the ground, blood stained the dust. And in the middle of it all, Lucy King moved among the wounded with calm efficiency, helping the corpsman stabilize men for evacuation. She didn't look like a cold-blooded killer who'd just eliminated 17 enemy fighters with clinical precision. She looked like exactly what her file claimed, an intelligence analyst doing her job. But everyone who'd witnessed what happened in this valley now understood a simple truth. Files lied, appearances deceived, and the most dangerous people were always the ones you never saw coming. The Chinook helicopter's rotors beat the air into submission as it touched down in a swirl of dust and debris. The wounded went aboard first, strapped into litters or walking with assistance depending on their injuries. The rest of the SEAL element followed, moving with the careful efficiency of men who'd just survived something they hadn't expected to survive. Lucy was the last one to board. She stood at the edge of the landing zone, weapons slung across her chest, scanning the ridgelines one final time, looking for threats that might still materialize, looking for survivors who might want revenge, looking because that's what you did when you were the person responsible for killing 17 men before breakfast. Hawthorne grabbed her arm as she reached the helicopter's ramp, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her forward movement. "We need to talk when we get back, full debrief. I'll provide a written report." "I don't want a written report. I want to know who you really work for and what the hell you were doing on my operation." Lucy pulled her arm free gently. "I work for the same country you do, Commander. I was doing my job. That's all you need to know." "Bullshit! That's all you're going to know," sir." She emphasized the rank without making it sound like mockery, though it came close. "Now let's get these wounded to medical attention before we have this conversation again." The flight back to the forward operating base took 40 minutes. Lucy sat alone near the crew chief's position, methodically cleaning her rifle while the SEALs clustered together, processing what they'd witnessed. Some were treating wounded. Some were staring into space with the 1,000-yard stare of men replaying combat in their heads. A few were stealing glances at Lucy, trying to reconcile the quiet woman breaking down her weapon with the lethal efficiency they'd witnessed in the valley. Chief Reeves finally broke away from his team and took the seat next to her. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just watched her hands move through the cleaning ritual. Oilcloth wiping carbon from the bolt, boar snake running through the barrel, every movement precise, economical. "My daughter wants to join the military," he said finally. "Marine Corps. I've been trying to talk her out of it, telling her it's no place for women, that she'll never get the respect she deserves, that the men will never really accept her." Lucy kept cleaning, not looking up. "You should stop." "Stop what?" "Lying to your daughter. Because that's what you've been doing. Lying. You've been telling her she can't, when you should have been helping her prepare for the fact that she absolutely can." Reeves was quiet. Then, "How long have you been doing this?" "The real work, not the analyst cover." 8 years. "How many?" He trailed off, unable to finish the question. Lucy finished it for him. "How many have I killed?" "Enough that I stopped counting. Not so many that I've stopped remembering. Each one, every face, every shot, every decision, you carry them with you. That's the price. But you're so young." "Old enough." She finally looked at him. "Your daughter. If she wants to serve, help her, train her, prepare her. Don't lie and tell her she can't do something just because it's hard. Because the truth is, Chief, some women can do this job better than any man. We have to work harder to prove it. We have to be twice as good to get half the credit. But we can do it. That shooting, the stuff I saw today, that's not just training. That's something else. That's what happens when you take someone with the right aptitude and give them unlimited ammunition, unlimited training time, and instructors who don't care about anything except making you the best possible version of yourself." She reassembled her rifle with swift, practiced movements. That's what happens when you stop thinking of warfare as a man's job and start thinking of it as a professional skill that anyone with the right attributes can master. The helicopter banked, approaching the landing zone. Through the open ramp, Lucy could see the base sprawling across the valley floor. Rows of tents and temporary buildings, vehicles parked in neat lines, the infrastructure of modern warfare, all logistics and planning and careful preparation, which made what had happened this morning even more disturbing. Someone had known exactly where the SEALs would be and exactly how they'd approach. Someone had prepared a perfect trap, and someone would want to know how Lucy King had dismantled that trap. The landing was controlled chaos. Medical personnel rushed toward the wounded. Officers appeared to take reports. The base commander wanted immediate briefings. Lucy slipped away in the confusion, heading toward the intelligence section's workspace with her rifle broken down and secured in its case. She'd written her reports before. She knew how this would go. She'd gotten maybe 50 meters when a voice stopped her cold. Captain King. Not Lucy. Not King. Captain King, with full rank. She turned to find a man in civilian clothes standing beside a black SUV that definitely didn't belong on a forward operating base. He was in his 50s, fit in the way that suggested he'd once been operational and hadn't let himself go completely soft. His eyes were hard and knowing. "Mr. Harrison," she said neutrally, "walk with me." It wasn't a request. She fell into step beside him as they moved away from the main base activities toward a corner where shipping containers had been stacked to create privacy. When they were alone, Harrison turned to face her. "I had 16 separate intelligence feeds telling me that operation was going to be a clean kill. Target in place, minimal security, textbook raid. And instead, it turned into the kind of cluster that gets congressional hearings. The intelligence was compromised. No shit. The question is how and by whom. But that's not why I'm here." He studied her with those hard eyes. "I'm here because you violated your cover. You were supposed to observe, take notes, provide real-time intelligence updates, not engage in direct action that resulted in—" He checked a tablet he pulled from his jacket. 17 enemy KIA attributed to a single shooter. Lucy stood perfectly still. "Would you prefer those 17 KIA to be American instead?" "I'd prefer you to follow orders. Your job was to maintain your cover as an analyst while gathering intelligence on SEAL Team operational protocols. That's why we inserted you. That's what you were supposed to do." "My job is to keep Americans alive. That's what I've always been told." "Your job is what I tell you it is." Harrison's voice hardened. "You're not a SEAL. You're not a Ranger. You're not even officially military anymore. You're an asset. A tool we use when conventional options won't work, and tools that act independently tend to get locked away." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm reminding you that there are consequences for going off script. The operation you were observing has now been completely compromised. Every man on that team knows there's something unusual about you. They'll talk, they'll speculate, and eventually, someone will start asking the kind of questions that lead to answers we don't want them finding." Lucy shifted her weight slightly, a movement so subtle that most people wouldn't have noticed. But Harrison noticed. He was trained to notice, and he took half a step back, suddenly aware that he was having this conversation with someone who'd killed 17 men before lunch and hadn't even broken a sweat. "So what happens now?" Lucy asked. "Now you write your report. You explain that the enemy positions were already compromised by airstrikes before you arrived. You explain that you provided intelligence support that enabled the SEALs to effectively engage targets. You explain everything except the part where you personally killed half the enemy force. You want me to lie. I want you to maintain operational security. There's a difference." Lucy considered this. She'd known this conversation was coming the moment she'd picked up her rifle. Every operation had its consequences, every decision its price. "And if I refuse, then you'll find yourself reassigned to a desk in a basement in Virginia, analyzing satellite photos of empty desert. Is that what you want? To be put on a shelf while other people do the real work?" He had her, and they both knew it. Lucy King was many things, but she wasn't someone who could sit behind a desk while Americans died in the field. That was her weakness, and Harrison knew exactly how to exploit it. "I'll write the report," she said finally. "Good. And King, next time you're inserted into an operation, remember what you're there for. Observation, analysis, support, not heroics." He walked away, leaving Lucy standing alone among the shipping containers. Above her, the Afghan sun beat down with merciless intensity. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of the base going about its business, helicopters landing and taking off, vehicles moving, the background noise of war. She looked down at her hands, steady. No tremor, no shake, no visible aftermath of what she'd done. But inside, where nobody else could see, Lucy King was making calculations about loyalty and duty, about following orders and doing what was right, about the difference between being a tool and being a person. And she was making a decision that would define everything that came next. 3 days later, Lucy sat in a briefing room with Commander Hawthorne, Chief Reeves, and 2 officers from JSOC she didn't recognize. The walls were blank concrete, no windows, the kind of room where secrets were shared and consequences were decided. Hawthorne started the meeting. "The official report states that the enemy positions were already degraded by preparatory fires before our ground element arrived. That Captain King provided valuable real-time intelligence that enabled effective targeting. That the operation, while it resulted in casualties, was ultimately successful." He paused, looking directly at Lucy. "But we all know that's bullshit. We all know what really happened. So I'm going to ask you one more time, Captain. Who do you really work for?" Lucy had spent 3 days deciding how to answer this question. She'd written the report Harrison wanted. She'd filed the paperwork. She'd done everything required to maintain her cover and preserve operational security. But sitting in this room, looking at men who'd almost died because intelligence had failed them. She made a different choice. "I work for an organization that doesn't officially exist," she said. "We identify situations where conventional military responses are either impossible or inadvisable. We insert assets, people like me, to resolve those situations through direct action while maintaining plausible deniability for the United States government." "Assassins," one of the JSOC officers said flatly. "Problem solvers. The targets are always verified, always legitimate threats to American lives or interests. But sometimes those threats are in places where we can't officially operate. Sometimes they're protected by diplomatic immunity or political considerations. Sometimes they're just too dangerous to approach through normal channels." Reeves leaned forward. "So you're what? A ghost? A myth? One of those operators that everyone hears about but nobody's supposed to believe in?" "I'm someone who's been given very specific training and very specific authorities to do a very specific job. That job is keeping Americans alive when all the normal rules make that impossible." Hawthorne was processing this, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally a kind of resigned acceptance. And the valley? That ambush was perfect because someone in the Afghan security forces tipped off the Taliban. They knew we were coming, knew our approach routes, knew our tactics. It was supposed to be a massacre. Instead, it turned into a lesson about underestimating the wrong person. "You saved our lives." "I did my job." "No." Hawthorne shook his head. "You went way beyond your job. You risked exposure, risked your cover, risked whatever mission you were really on, to save a bunch of SEALs who'd spent the entire flight treating you like you didn't belong. Why?" Lucy was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because that's what we do. We keep Americans alive, even when they don't know we exist, even when they wouldn't approve of our methods if they did know. We stand in the shadows, and we do the ugly work so that people like you can do the heroic work in the light. That's the deal we made. That's the burden we carry." The room was silent. Finally, one of the JSOC officers spoke up. "This conversation never happened. This briefing never occurred. As far as official records are concerned, Captain King provided intelligence support. That's all. Clear?" Everyone nodded. "Good. Because if word gets out that we've got assets operating outside normal chains of command, conducting lethal operations on American authority but without official oversight, there will be investigations, there will be congressional hearings, there will be criminal charges, and everyone in this room will be caught in that net." They filed out one by one. Hawthorne lingered, waiting until it was just him and Lucy. "For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. Completely, totally wrong. Most people are. Is it lonely? Being that person? Being someone nobody's supposed to know about?" Lucy considered the question. "Sometimes. But then I think about the SEALs who went home to their families because I was there. I think about the attacks that never happened because someone like me was in the right place at the right time. And I remember why I do this. Will I see you again? Probably not. People like me don't stick around. We move, we adapt, we disappear. That's how we stay effective." She stood, gathering her minimal gear. Hawthorne watched her prepare to leave, this woman who'd saved his team and disappeared into mythology before his eyes. "King? One last thing." She paused at the door. "Thank you for my men, for keeping them alive." Or, "You're welcome, Commander. Now do me a favor." "What's that?" "Stop underestimating people based on what they look like or what their files say, because the most dangerous people are always the ones you never see coming. Remember that, and you might live long enough to make Admiral." She walked out, leaving Hawthorne standing alone in the empty briefing room. 6 months later, in a different country, conducting a different operation, Lucy King sat in an observation post, watching a target house through high-powered optics. The mission was simple: identify, confirm, eliminate. The kind of work that never made the news, never generated medals, never appeared in official records. Her spotter, a young operator on his second tour, whispered nervously, "You really do this? Just sit here and wait for someone to give you a shot, then take it, then disappear? That's the job. Doesn't it bother you? Killing people from distance, without them even knowing?" Lucy adjusted her scope fractionally, compensating for a wind shift that her spotter hadn't even noticed yet. "It used to. Then I stopped thinking about it as killing people and started thinking about it as solving problems. That man in that house, he's planning an attack that will kill hundreds, maybe thousands. He's protected by his government, by his security detail, by international law. Conventional options have been exhausted. So I'm here. And tomorrow, hundreds of people who don't even know I exist will wake up alive because of what I do tonight. That's how I live with it." The target appeared in a window. Lucy's finger moved to the trigger. Stand by. Standing by. The shot was perfect, clean, final. The target dropped and Lucy was already breaking down her weapon, preparing to disappear into the night. Another problem solved, another threat eliminated. Another day of being the person nobody was supposed to know about, doing the job nobody was supposed to acknowledge existed. The wolf doesn't announce itself to the sheep. And America's deadliest wolves wore faces that nobody would ever remember, worked jobs that nobody would ever acknowledge, and carried burdens that nobody would ever understand. Lucy King was one of those wolves, and the world was safer because of it, even though the world would never know her name. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to hear more powerful stories of brave women in uniform.